My name is Michael. I was 16 when I took my third flight from New York to Montreal. Even though I'd flown before, I still felt nervous. My dad, always the brave one, was with me. He'd often fly for his job, so planes were no big deal to him. He'd try to make me laugh, saying, "Third time's the charm, Michael." And then, with a gentle nudge, he'd remind me, "We're visiting Aunt Lisa and your cousins. They're excited to see us." I nodded, taking a deep breath. I didn't know then that this flight would be so different from the rest. I slid on my headphones, hoping to lose myself in some music. As the melodies began, I looked around, my gaze drifting from passenger to passenger. That's when I spotted him. A strange-looking man in a long dark coat across the aisle with dark shades on and a long flowing beard. There was something odd and entrancing about him, setting him apart from everyone else. The deep black coat he wore had some strange markings on it. An hour into the flight, an uncanny silence enveloped the cabin. It felt as if every passenger had simultaneously drifted into a deep sleep. In this hushed atmosphere, a rapid, low-toned murmur caught my attention. Turning my gaze to the old man, I observed him without his shades. Seemed as if he's praying, or at least it seemed like it. But his chants were fast, fervent, unlike any prayer I'd heard. It sounded more like he was invoking something, trying to summon or cause some malevolent event. Every so often, when his voice peaked in intensity, the plane would shudder, making my heart race. The people beside him, completely oblivious, continued their undisturbed slumber. For some reason, I couldn't tear my gaze away from him. But the more I watched, the more aware he became of my prying eyes. He'd occasionally glance at me, his stare icy cold, sending shivers down my spine. The plane was shaking every few seconds, each bout of turbulence stronger than the last. In the dim cabin light, I could see the man's fingers move swiftly, as if weaving an invisible web. With every motion of his hand, the plane shook. I was convinced he was orchestrating this chaos. It was in one of those jarring moments. Our eyes met. The old man's gaze, sharp and intense, locked onto mine, acknowledging that he'd caught me observing him. Panicking, I quickly ducked down, hoping the seat would shield me. But curiosity gnawed at me, and I chanced a peek over the top. He was still watching, his intense gaze making my heart race. I glanced at my dad, his steady breathing indicating deep sleep. The thought of waking him crossed my mind, but I hesitated. Would he even believe me? Or worse, think I was just being a scared kid, letting my imagination run wild? So, with a deep breath, I kept my head down, never to make eye contact with him again, praying my dad and I make it through this alive. As we started our descent into Montreal, a wave of relief washed over me. I let out a sigh of relief. Straight away, I wanted to tell my dad about what I saw, but decided to keep it to myself. As I collected my belongings, I waited for the old man to walk past, but he never did. When I stood to exit the plane, I turned back to check his seat, only to find it empty. Many flights have come and gone since that day, but I never forget to scan my fellow passengers before settling in. The chilling part. Sometime later, my dad mentioned a nightmarish dream he had on that very flight. In it, a man with a long beard was shouting frantically, yet everyone around him remained asleep. The description was hauntingly familiar. When that happened, I finally shared my experience with him. Who really was that man? Was he casting a dark spell, trying to send us plummeting from the sky? Or was he just an ordinary person, and my fear painted him as something else? The fact that Dad dreamt about him makes it all the more eerie. Now every flight I take, I can't help but look over my shoulder, wondering if there's someone else with unknown intentions on board.